Seemingly out of nowhere, Eric Gert released an HTML5 port of Plazma Burst 2, and it's so much better. You don't even need to download it, you can play it right now in your browser. Just go to www.plasmaburst2.com/h5 or click the link in the description. You can also access it on the play page by clicking Try Experimental HTML5 version. If you do try it out, I recommend using the latest version of the Google Chrome browser for the best experience. On the Flash version, I can barely run the game at 60 frames per second, but on this new version, I can run it at 165 frames per second without a problem. Now, this is still a work in progress. Eric has spent less than 2 weeks on it so far, so a lot is still missing. But he's releasing an update nearly every day now, so this video may get outdated very quickly. I already had to change the script after the latest update adding the settings page. It is a one-to-one port of the game, not a rewrite. Most of the code is identical and he just copied and pasted it from the Flash version. Therefore, a lot of the bugs from the Flash version as well as some old bugs that were patched out are included. However, at least to my eye, it looks a lot better than the Flash version. The text is crisper, it stutters a lot less, and the frame rate isn't capped at 60 FPS, but instead your display's refresh rate. There's also some extra info of how long the logic and rendering takes with a frame time value instead of a frame rate. So if your game logic takes 2 milliseconds to calculate and it takes 4 milliseconds to render, then the entire process takes 6 milliseconds. Each second has 1000 milliseconds, which means you can potentially render 166 frames a second. This is important to keep in mind. It may take quite a while to load, and that's normal. If you're stuck on a black screen with a button at the bottom right, just wait up to a minute. There's no main menu, the def and level complete screen are missing. There is a button at the bottom right which does give extra options, God mode, ability to spawn guns, switch between campaign levels, and most importantly, go to any map of your choice. Now, only maps from before the second fan art update work, so some of the more recent maps may not work, but a lot of older single player maps do work, which is great. There is no multiplayer implementation yet, unfortunately, but that could happen in as soon as a month. While the performance significantly improved for me, not everyone has the same performance increase. Some people experience worse performance, so you'll have to try it yourself to see if it performs better for you. But if you have a modern computer, it should. One thing you can try to improve performance is making sure your browser is using the correct graphics card for the hardware acceleration. If your computer or laptop has both a dedicated graphics card and an integrated graphics card in your CPU, Chrome might be using the much less powerful integrated graphics card. To make sure it uses your best hardware, go to Windows Settings, System, Display, Graphics Settings at the bottom, and then click on Browse and select the path for Chrome. It's most likely in C/program files/google/chrome/application/chrome.exe. Then click Add and it should show up at the bottom. Then click Options and click High Performance. This should choose your dedicated graphics card if you have one, but if it doesn't, you can also go on specific GPU and try the different options there. There are a few things you may notice about this version that are different. One, for example, you don't have a username, and the bots are on normal difficulty instead of easy. Now, the bots are already more difficult to play against on 60 FPS. I'm not sure why, they just are. So normal mode at a high FPS is already quite difficult, and at the moment, it seems you can't adjust any of the settings, but you actually can. However, it won't be super easy, so check the pinned comment to see if this guide is redundant, and you can just normally adjust everything in the settings page now. On Google Chrome, go to the top right 3 dots and click on them. Then hover over More Tools and click Developer Tools. Alternatively, you can just do the keyboard shortcut Ctrl-Shift-I or just hit F12 on your keyboard. Then, at the top, go to the Application tab, and under Storage on the left, click on the arrow next to Local Storage. Now, depending on how many websites you visited, there may be a long list. Just scroll down until you find www.plasmaburst2.com and click on that. Then, on the right, look for the key Plazma_burst2. In here contains the settings text which the HTML5 version of the game uses. Double click on the value, and once the text is selected, copy it. After that, you're going to want to open a text editor and paste the text into it. Now make sure to be very careful with any changes you do. If you accidentally delete a comma or symbol, the entire code may not work, and you may have to delete the key to restore it to the default settings. After that, all the changes you would want to do would be here. For example, if you want to make the bots easy, then find the easy_mode tag and change it from false to true. Make sure pro_bots is set to false, as that is the hard difficulty setting. And make sure low_HPS is set to false too, which sets your health to 130 and is the impossible difficulty. Now since these settings aren't mutually exclusive, you can technically set low HPS to true as well as easy mode to true, and then what you basically have is an amalgamation of the easy difficulty but with impossible mode health and bots which aren't able to shoot when they're dying. There's a bunch of other settings you can adjust here, like your graphics settings, your campaign nickname, even your volume volume. So in order to save time, I made this diagram that you can pause and refer to while adjusting your settings through the code. This entire method also works for the Flash version of the game, and I might make a video on how to change those in the future. After you make your desired changes, copy all of the text and paste it back into the local storage value field, and then refresh your page. If you mess anything up, you can just delete the key and refresh the page to reset to default. You might need to beat the first level for it to show up if you do that though. Another new thing that you may notice is the game logic rate and screen refresh rate settings. These are different to the frames per second setting that you're used to in the Flash version, but it solves a huge problem with high FPS. If you played Geometry Dash, you might know how Update 2.2 changed the physics. Before Update 2.2, the physics update rate was tied to the frame rate, so each physics tick updated on each frame. In Update 2.2, your FPS could be anything, but the physics were locked to 240 updates a second, and the only way to bypass that would be to use a mod called Click Between Frames. How does that apply to Plazma Burst 2 though? Well, Plazma Burst 2 is essentially doing the same change. Game logic rate is now the rate at which your physics update. It's separated from your frames per second. This means that you can have the game physics update 30 times a second, but the movement is interpolated and you can still play at 60 frames or higher. This technically means that you can get the higher self boost that 30 frames per second gives you without actually having to play at 30 frames a second. That's cool and all, but why can't I just play the game normally at 120 frames a second or higher? Well, remember earlier when I said that this directly solves a huge problem? Well, a lot of important physics calculations in the game are directly tied to the frame rate, and the game was originally made with 30 frames per second in mind. It wasn't made to handle such high frame rates. So on over 1000 frames per second, the effects of this are obvious. The way the characters move is just wrong, and for some reason you don't crouch as low on higher frames per second like you would on 20 or 30. Now right now in its current implementation, it's quite buggy, especially on the low physics setting, but I think it's the right direction to go in order to support higher frames per second, but without messing up the game's internal logic. I do think that there should be an option to match the game logic rate to your display refresh rate instead of capping it at 60, just to have the option if anything. On Eric's Patreon, he released a poll on what the future of the HTML5 port should be. He estimates that finishing the port will only take a month, and improving multiplayer will take an extra month. The way I see it, it's already been 9 years since Plazma Burst 3 started development, so if it takes an extra 3 years to finish development, that'll be 144 months in total. I don't think the extra 2-month delay will be too noticeable on the release date in comparison to the total time it's taken so far. However, I do feel like this port significantly improves the quality of life of current Plazma Burst 2 players with significantly better performance and the ability to run in the browser. In my opinion, Eric should finish the port and improve multiplayer, aka the planned copy/paste/improve, which seems to be the second most popular option. What I am glad to see is that one of the least popular options is planned hibernate, which is just to abandon the port altogether. But regardless, most people prefer the option to finish the port at a bare minimum, which I completely agree with. If you want to vote on this poll, you'll need to subscribe to Eric Gert's Patreon at the $1 tier, but if you want to watch the monthly Plazma Burst free development videos, you'll need the $5 tier. Overall, I love this port and see a lot of potential in it, and I can't wait to see it fully finished with multiplayer access. Anytime I play the Flash version now, it just feels like a significant downgrade. Anyway, thanks for watching this video, subscribe for more Plazma Burst content, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.